Right now, you are carrying one of the most bizarre anomalies in the animal kingdom. Compared to a gorilla or a chimp, the human male has the largest banana size relative to body weight of any primate on Earth. Today, we're decoding the 8 evolutionary gear sets, and we are starting with the smallest of them all, but don't worry. I am sure you have a great personality, the compact warrior. If your specs are under 5 inches in length with average girth around 4.6 inches, you are carrying what evolutionary biologists consider the most strategically fascinating build in the human record. While the world is obsessed with size, nature was obsessed with survivability. Here is the context. In our ancestral tribes, visibility was a death sentence. Dominant males actively policed the group, and being a visible threat didn't make you a hero. It made you a target. It got you excluded, injured, or eliminated before you could ever pass on your legacy. The compact warrior's answer to this was the low observable strategy. Researchers in PLOS Biology refer to this as the satellite or sneaky mating strategy. By flying under the radar of dominant rivals, this build prioritized social integration over physical intimidation. You weren't built to win a single violent confrontation at age 20. You were built to survive for 60 years, accumulating more opportunities through stealth and persistence. In the game of evolution, surviving long enough to play 100 times beats winning once and dying young. There is a massive biological trade-off here. Extreme anatomical display carries a heavy energy tax. By lowering the metabolic investment in display hardware, your biology redirected those resources toward immune function and longevity. You are quite literally built to outlast the competition. The psychological result? You have elite-level strategic patience. While others label this as neuroticism, modern analysis reveals a high-resolution social radar. You don't lead with a loud signal, so you've developed a sixth sense for group dynamics, reading shifts in the room before anyone else. You win the chess match by knowing exactly when to stay invisible. But while the warriors survived by staying invisible to rivals, another branch of our ancestors took a different gamble, prioritizing high-speed efficiency over raw power. If you carry the thin and fast build, your edge isn't about avoiding the fight, it's about winning the race, the Agile Scout. If your specs are under 5 inches in length and under 4.5 inches in girth, you aren't just an average player. You are the high-frequency operator of the human record. If the compact warrior is playing traditional chess, the Agile Scout is playing speed chess, on 12 boards at once. The evolutionary pressure that forged this build is known as scramble competition. This is a dynamic where victory isn't decided by who is the strongest or most intimidating, but by who is the fastest and most energetically efficient. In ancestral, multi-partner environments, the competitive edge belonged to the male who could act with precision and expend the least amount of biological energy doing it. Low anatomical volume translates directly to low metabolic overhead. In resource-scarce environments, this allowed for a higher frequency of genetic transmission, while the heavy builds were sidelined by the massive energy cost of their own hardware. The Agile Scout was already moving on to the next opportunity. It is the ultimate volume over intensity play. The hidden advantage here is extreme metabolic versatility. You carry the lowest biological upkeep of any configuration. In a long arc survival scenario, being the most efficient machine in the room is a far greater asset than being the most decorative one. The psychological result is the precision architect mindset. You are a social chameleon with a compulsive ability to adapt. You don't just fit in, you optimize the environment around you. But what happens when evolution isn't looking for a specialist? What if the goal isn't stealth or speed, but universal compatibility? For that, we have to look at the next build, the Standard Cavendish. If you fall between 5 to 6 inches with average girth, you carry the Standard Cavendish build. In evolutionary biology, being a generalist isn't a compromise. It is one of the most successful long-term strategies ever documented. Think about the actual Cavendish banana. It isn't the most commercially successful because it's the sweetest, or most visually shocking. It's successful because it thrives in the most environments and satisfies the broadest range of preferences. Nature applied that exact same logic to you. You are the universal adapter of the human record. The pressure that forged this build is called stabilizing selection. This is the process where extreme variants are gradually weeded out because they carry too much risk or cost. Over thousands of years, the middle-of-the-range builds accumulated because they were compatible with the most partners in the most environments. You don't over-signal and alienate, and you don't under-signal and get missed. You are the biological Goldilocks zone. The hidden advantage here is systemic efficiency. Maintaining extreme anatomical hardware requires a massive metabolic budget. By carrying the standard build, Your biology redirects that energy toward long-term health and stress regulation. While the extreme builds are paying a high biological tax just to exist, you are operating with a surplus. The psychological residue of this build, you carry the grounded diplomat profile. Perceived as the most reliable and trustworthy, people take you at face value. You own your space with stable confidence because you aren't trying to win the table. You are the table. But let's be honest, nature doesn't always play it safe. Sometimes, evolution decides to double down on a single aggressive feature to solve a specific problem. And if you've ever wondered why some builds focus entirely on width over length, you're about to meet the most disruptive build in the set, the Girth Dominator. If you have average length but above average girth, over 5 inches in circumference, your evolutionary strategy has shifted from acquisition to retention. In the game of survival, finding a partner is only step one. Keeping that partner is an entirely different challenge, and your build was optimized specifically for the long game. The science here is rooted in mechanoreceptor stimulation. Simply put, greater girth increases the activation of pressure-sensitive nerve endings. Research in the 2022 journal Sexuality and Culture links this specific physical trait to higher rates of partner satisfaction. But from an evolutionary perspective, it goes deeper. Physical satisfaction triggers a physiological lock, a biological bond that increases partner loyalty and reduces the likelihood of mate switching. While other builds focus on the initial hook, you are designed for biological bond formation. You don't win through a loud visual display. You win through the intensity of the connection. In nature, a partner retained for years is infinitely more valuable than a dozen brief encounters. Your hidden advantage is compounding value. Your competitive edge isn't front-loaded, it grows over time. Because your hardware is designed to strengthen existing bonds, your reproductive success is more stable and less prone to the volatility of the dating market. You aren't just a participant, you are an anchor. The psychological residue of this build is high relational confidence. Your extroversion is the "I am focused on you" type. You make individuals feel uniquely valued. You aren't the loudest voice in the room, but you are the most trusted leader in the circle, because your presence is calibrated for depth and stability rather than a superficial show. But sometimes, evolution doesn't just focus on volume or width. Sometimes it adds a specific architectural twist to solve the most difficult problem in human biology: direct genetic competition. The precision striker. If you have average dimensions with a notable anatomical curve, whether upward, downward, or lateral, you aren't looking at a cosmetic variation. You are looking at a functional targeting system. In the most literal sense, your architecture is a piece of high-stakes engineering. The theory here is rooted in sperm displacement and targeting. Ancestral research increasingly suggests that our past was far more competitive than once thought. In these environments, males weren't just competing before mating, they were competing during it. This is known as sperm competition. According to the 2026 PLOS Biology research, a curved profile is mechanically advantageous. It acts as a biological piston, designed to physically displace previously deposited genetic material while simultaneously targeting the cervical region with higher precision than a straight profile. It is, quite literally, a biological aimbot. You are carrying a sophisticated mechanical adaptation designed for a high-intensity reproductive environment. The hidden advantage is tactical stimulation. Because the curve consistently targets specific pressure points more reliably than linear geometry, it triggers the same mate retention mechanisms we saw in the Girth Dominator. You are getting two competitive advantages, displacement and retention, from a single architectural feature. The psychological residue of this build is targeted attunement. You possess a deep, precision-focused empathy. While others charm the crowd, you go deep with the individual. This is the intuitive empath profile, the person who knows exactly what others need to hear. But while some builds survived by being precise, others survived by being impossible to ignore. Evolution occasionally decides that the best way to win a fight is to prevent it from ever starting. The lengthy Intimidator. If your specs are long and lean, over 7 inches in length but under 4.5 inches in girth, you are carrying the Vanguard build, and its primary function isn't what you might assume. It isn't primarily about the mating event itself. It's about everything that happens before it. The evolutionary driver here is intrasexual signaling. Because humans are among the only fully bipedal primates, our anatomy is significantly more visible in social settings compared to our quadrupedal relatives. Walking upright turned the human banana into a high-visibility signal. The 2026 PLOS Biology data confirms that length, specifically, functions as a pre-mating filter. It acts as a visual stay-back signal to lower status rivals. They assess the signal, calculate the risk of a physical conflict, and choose to disengage. This allows the lengthy Intimidator to maintain status without ever having to throw a punch. In the biological record, it's the ultimate energy saver, the equivalent of a currently occupied sign that prevents the fight from ever starting. The hidden advantage here is passive social deterrence. In the wild, every conflict avoided is energy conserved and injury risk eliminated. Over a lifetime, the ability to maintain status through display, rather than combat, leads to an enormous aggregate advantage in longevity and resource access. You don't have to win the war if no one dares to declare it. The psychological profile of this build is the bold explorer archetype. Constant visual attention since adolescence has hard-coded a comfort with being seen. You lead with a natural, effortless presence, often occupying the leadership role simply because your biology expects it. But what happens when nature stops balancing the scales and decides to maximize every single metric at once? When the goal isn't just to signal status, but to overwhelm the senses? For that, we have to look at the build scientists call the maximum strategy, the Voluminous Overlord. If your specs are long and thick, over 7 inches in both dimensions, you are carrying the endgame boss build. This configuration carries maxed out stats in 2 categories simultaneously, which sounds ideal, until you look at the metabolic cost column. The evolutionary driver here is dual selection pressure. Most builds are optimized for one specific environment. The Overlord was optimized for 2 at once. In the 2026 PLOS Biology avatar experiments, researchers had participants rate anatomical models for both attractiveness and perceived dominance threat. This build didn't just rank highly, it took first place in both. It is the ultimate 2 birds, 1 stone strategy. It provides the maximum attraction signal to potential mates, while simultaneously serving as the maximum deterrence signal to rivals. You are the build that wins the competition before it starts, and wins the selection after it's over. The hidden advantage here is paradoxical peace. Because the deterrence signal is so aggressive, you rarely have to escalate to actual physical conflict. The display itself does the work of 1,000 arguments. This means that, despite carrying the most intimidating hardware, your ancestral lineage likely engaged in less direct violence than the builds that had to fight their way to the top. You aren't just a warrior, you are a deterrent. The psychological residue of this build? Radical transparency. With no stealth option available, you've developed a psychology of unapologetic presence. Your challenge? Avoiding the over-reliance trap. Remembering that not every social problem requires an endgame boss solution. But there is one final build that evolution kept in the deck. A build that doesn't wait for the action to start. It acts as a constant 24/7 broadcast of health and status, even in its resting state. The Showman Sentinel, defined not just by dimensions, but by its state. A high-visibility flaccid presentation relative to its erect size. This is the build that is effectively always on, and in the theater of evolution, that distinction is massive. In our ancestral environments, communal spaces, group hunting, and shared shelters, privacy was a modern luxury that didn't exist. Anatomy was visible in its resting state constantly. For most builds, the resting state is a poor predictor of the functional signal. But for the Showman Sentinel, the resting state is the signal. Evolutionary biologists call this a constant health proxy. It is a real-time, 24/7 broadcast of biological quality and immune system resilience without requiring a single display event. While other builds have to perform to signal their status, the Sentinel signals passively and unavoidably. You are the biological billboard that never gets taken down. The hidden advantage here is zero-cost signaling. Most dominance cues require a massive expenditure of energy or metabolic resources. The Sentinel's signal is active regardless of whether the individual is doing anything to maintain it. It is the only build in the set where the competitive advantage is literally effortless to broadcast. You don't have to seek status. You simply emit it. The psychological result is social accountability. Because your standing is always being observed, you've developed a profile of high social responsibility. You can't fix your image later. It's being updated in real time by everyone around you. You are the community guardian. Maintaining harmony. Because you understand that your visibility makes you accountable to the tribe. Here is the truth that cuts through all the noise. Every single one of these builds worked. Every variation we've decoded today exists in the current human population because the ancestors carrying those traits survived. Whether you are a compact warrior or a voluminous overlord, you are not a design flaw. You are a successful evolutionary output. I'm Noah, and I'll see you in the next video.